Yeah, I game overed again. Yeah, if you thought that it was impressive that I beat all of Zelda 1 only dying once, well, I guess it was, but Zelda 2 is a lot harder. Like, you're going to see me run out of lives a lot more in Zelda 2, and it's a good thing that I did a lot of editing. I've actually gone through this cave without getting this candle a few times. It's not really that hard. Like, the Octoroks are one of the enemies that you can clearly see even when it's dark by looking at the floor. It's random what items an enemy will drop. Like, sometimes they'll drop experience point bags, and sometimes they'll drop magic containers. Well, not magic containers, that would be pretty broken. No, sometimes they drop blue potions, which restore 1 square of your magic meter. And sometimes they drop red potions, which is a rare drop, and they're incredibly helpful. I don't know why they're called potions. I mean, they don't look anything like potions. If anything, they look more like the bombs from Link to the Past. Like, there are some... I don't really think that bad graphics are truly bad when it doesn't negatively impact gameplay. Like, there isn't that many... I can't really think of an example off the top of my head of something in the game that it inconveniences me that I don't know what it is. Like for the most part, I know what everything is, and if I don't, it doesn't matter anyways. Yeah. It sucks how sometimes your magic meter isn't quite full enough for you to use the spell you need. And it's hard to tell exactly what spells require, because you can see a number on them you can see a number next to the spells on the spell menu, and that gives you a general indication of how much magic they require in relation to each other, but it doesn't tell you how many squares of the meter they take away, and that's what they should tell you. I mean, something I really love about the magic meter in this game is that it's separated into squares. It's not like in all the other Zelda games, where it's just one long bar. No, this is separated into squares. So it's a lot easier to talk about how much magic you have left. But again, the spell list doesn't tell you how many squares a spell will use up. Upgrading the magic stat actually decreases the amount of magic that using a spell will take, which is kind of unintuitive. I mean, usually in an RPG, when you level up your magic, your magical spells deal more damage. Not really. Not in this game. You don't really attack with spells in this game. It's all about the sword. I mean, there's only one spell that attacks enemies, and you get it really late into the game, and it was let's just say you expected to one-shot every enemy, but there's some enemies that aren't killed by instantly, and I was enraged to find that out, because I barely ever used that spell at all in the first place, and so I was expecting it to be a really useful, powerful spell that I could rely on in a pinch. But it turns out that since it doesn't one-shot every enemy, let's say that you're stuck in a corner and you really want to get rid of this enemy that's constantly attacking you, but you use that spell and it doesn't one-shot the enemy anyways. It's incredibly frustrating and annoying. Yeah, you don't want to rush too much in these platforming sections. It's kind of dangerous. The cool thing is that this game doesn't have... its bottomless pits are completely justified, because it only has water and lava. It doesn't have inexplicable bottomless pits of doom. it always makes sense why falling into a pit will kill you. Because Link can't swim. He could never swim in Zelda 1. So it makes sense that in Zelda 2, when he's 16, he can't swim either. I passed up that theory because I didn't need it, and it doesn't respawn, which is annoying. And as you can tell, I game overed a lot trying to get through this place. And the annoying thing is that when you game over, all of the experience points that you collected are gone to waste. Now, it could be worse, it could have all of your levels gone to waste, but it's just frustrating. It kind of hurts your sense of accomplishment. And I think this game would have been better if it had infinite lives instead of having an annoying life system just because it's a platformer. I mean, the game would be unplayable if it had you play through it with no lives at all. I mean, like, imagine that every time you died, you're kicked all the way back to North Castle with all of your experience points gone. Imagine that playing through the game, you played it as if you had only one life, like it was every other Zelda game. Yeah, that would suck. So the game needs to do what it does, where dying doesn't always send you all the way back to the beginning. Ugh! Castlevania again! I hate it when that happens. And that's gonna happen more the more you progress with the game. But it's not too bad now. At this point in the game, things aren't really all that cheap. I mean, some of the enemies are cheap, but sometimes I just have trouble with the enemies because I'm not trying hard enough, and I don't really care enough to time things exactly right. Like, this game can be hard, but I don't think it's as hard as people say it is. It's not until later in the game when it starts to get its biggest problems. I mean, it's not until later in the game that it starts to become annoying for me. I just wanted to show you all the other areas in Death Mountain. The proper way to go through it is to just keep going right as much as you can, and then when you can't go right anymore, go down. It's pretty easy once you know what to do. But going through it for the very first time without a guide, it's probably going to suck for you because you aren't going to know exactly what caves you need to go in to get all the way through the mountain. I like that. I like how there's parts in the overworld where you can fall down into a grotto. A grotto basically being an underground cave. It's like no, in Twilight Princess there were grottos as well, but you got into them by digging, not by walking along the grass, and then all of a sudden the grass would open up beneath you and you'd fall into it. That would be kind of annoying. It's not always intuitive where the secret areas are, but sometimes it is. Like, I mean, generally when you see a lone tree graphic, then chances are it's a secret area and you should go there. And I like the hammer because it opens up shortcuts in the overworld. And it's actually mandatory to beat the game, so I hope you got it, because it's not just for convenience. It's also mandatory to beat the game. But it's a good thing that you have a hammer for shortcuts, but the overworld in this game is so much bigger. I thought there was a secret area there for some reason. The overworld is so much bigger in this game, so I think having a warp flute would have been much more beneficial in this game than in Zelda 1. It's especially annoying because, oh, you think that the overworld is big now? It actually gets even bigger. You haven't even seen half of it yet. And again, every time you die, every time you lose all your lives, you start all the way in North Castle all over again. And you have to go all the way back. And I hate that. don't go into the cross areas, the graveyard areas, because they have these they have these invisible ghosts flying around called Moes, which I'm pretty sure is a mistranslation of Poe, because Poe is what ghosts are usually called in Zelda games. But I just hate those enemies because until you get the cross, which is an item that you don't get until the 6th dungeon, by the way, and by then it's almost long. I mean, you do have to go through one more graveyard on the way to the final dungeon. It's just so annoying how you're at the part of the game where you're going to be going through the graveyard for the longest amount of time, but you don't get the cross until long after it's going to be the most useful. I don't think that's good game design. Sometimes the boulders are blocking the way to caves, and you gotta destroy them. And it's weird how they have a unique graphic for after you've destroyed a boulder, but that graphic goes away and turns into ordinary sand that doesn't look nearly as appealing and sort of is out of place after you leave the screen and come back. Like, I prefer when it just looks like a path. But when you let the enemies run at you and hit you when you're in the overworld and you're standing on a regular path, then you're going to be transported to a completely empty battle screen that is thankfully extremely short, and you can get out of it really quickly, because that would be kind of annoying if it was bigger. Walking along the paths are basically a safe zone, because as you can see, yeah, there weren't any enemies there. And the enemies don't appear when you're walking along the path. So what I like to do sometimes is make sure that the enemies hit me when I'm on the path. And now we're in the harbor town of Mido. Most of the villages are the same thing. It's not really... There's different dialogue. And just like in Zelda 1, the dialogue is a mixture of badly translated and pathetically short, because the NES couldn't handle having too large of an amount of dialogue. So, like, everything has to fit onto one text box. And the dialogue was better in the Japanese version because with Japanese characters, they could fit more on them. Oh, that's intuitive. How are you supposed to know that you can stand on that thing? How are you supposed to know that that building isn't just part of the background, and that you can actually jump on it and walk on it? I mean, sure, there's a door there, but it's not something that you usually have to deal with. I love this move. This is the best move in the game, and I will be taking advantage of it constantly. The magic restorers, which thankfully have a completely different sprite from the old ladies, in that they're a palette swap, but it's better than looking the same. The magic restorers, they can actually function as a life restorer as well if you just cast the life spell and then you just heal yourself. Like, you can use the life spell in tandem with the magic restorers. So as soon as you get to towns where there are magic restorers, the life restorers become kind of redundant. I mean, it's annoying having to use magic restorers more than once, which you're gonna have to do if you're using the life spell in tandem with them, but it's not really that big of a deal. These are called Link dolls. They're extra lives. But the really annoying thing is that they don't respawn. And once you get them, if you lose them forever. And I think this game should have done what Unleashed Wii would do, and have a live system where getting extra lives, you can't grind for lives in that game for some stupid reason. Instead, you get an item that permanently increases the maximum amount of lives that you start out with. And that's what Zelda 2 should have done. Those Link dolls really should have increased the amount of lives that you start out with. Because as it stands, you don't start out with nearly enough lives. This is one of those weird games that has zero be a life all by itself. Because you could clearly see there that when I opened up the item menu, I had 0 on my life counter, but I was still alive. And I just hate how inconsistent it is among platformers. That sometimes 0 counts as a life, and sometimes it doesn't. It makes it really hard to... It just stupid and inconsistent. I wouldn't have a problem with it if it wasn't so inconsistent. The fairy spell is a lot more useful than it appears. You can't attack with it. You can't attack with it, but it's gonna get a lot more useful later on. Yeah, there's red mows and there's blue mows that you can't see right now. And this is a pointless screen. I hate empty rooms that psych you out and make you think, oh, maybe there's something I can do here. But nope, there's nothing you can do at all. That was a wasted development time. It's just... a lot of things about the game annoy me. But, yeah, these enemies, they can only be killed... Well, I say they can only be killed, but... it is actually possible in some circumstances to kill them without the downward thrust. But usually it happens when they're on platforms higher than you, and it's not very likely to happen. Usually you'll kill them with your sword beam, and the sword beam is a lot less useful in this game because sometimes it doesn't deal any damage at all. But you can always rely on your regular attack to hit instead of the sword beam. So it's not the Zelda problem that usually plagues Zelda games where the sword beam sucks because it makes you deal an average of less damage to enemies. No, in this game, the sword beam isn't an inconvenience at all. It just says less useful than in Zelda 1. See you for the next part.